So, you own a beautiful piece of property. Maybe it's got sprawling woods, fields, maybe even wetlands, just a perfect slice of nature, right? And you've probably imagined it, as a great spot for hunting or fishing, maybe just getting outdoors. And then it starts. The requests roll in. Friends call, acquaintances, maybe even people you hardly know. They're all asking, hey, can I use your land? And suddenly, what seemed like a simple sure becomes a much trickier question. Should I really let people hunt or do other stuff on my land? Our mission in this deep dive today is to help you unpack exactly that. We've sifted through our source material to pull out the key things every landowner really needs to think about. We're talking about managing the risks involved, keeping control over who's actually on your property, and something that might surprise you, the potential to actually generate some income from it. We're going to walk you through all of that.
That's right. Because it's not just about being generous, is it? Saying yes or no to a neighbor. We want to go beyond that and really dig into the practical side. What does it actually mean when you invite people onto your land for recreation,
Yeah.
for your liability, your peace of mind,
Yeah.
even, your wallet? We'll look at some solid ways to minimize those risks, limit the numbers effectively, and how you might even potentially turn that land into an asset that pays through a specific, increasingly common method.
Okay, let's tackle the big one first. Risk. The elephant in the room, maybe. I think most landowners kind of get that there are some risks when you open up your property. But what about the less obvious stuff? The liabilities that can really catch you off guard? Even with things that seem pretty harmless. I mean, what could really go wrong besides the obvious, like a hunting accident?
Yeah, that's absolutely the place to start. Because while sharing your land feels, neighborly and innocent, our sources point out a whole bunch of dangers people often don't think about. Turns out, a lot of things can happen on land, especially when there's no supervision. And it gets trickier when you mix human activity with natural environments. We're talking, yes, hunting, but also fishing, ATV use, camping, swimming, even just hiking. They all carry their own risks. But here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit concerning. It's not just about the people you invite. It's also about trespassers.
Right.
And the really significant legal point here, the thing that's often quite unsettling for landowners, is that even trespassers, people who have zero right to be there, might still be able to sue you if they get hurt on your land. Just picture it. Someone sneaks onto your property, falls down an old well or something, breaks a leg. Now, depending on where you are, they could still try to file a claim against you. It really highlights this idea that you've got people mixed with nature, which makes an extremely unpredictable duo.
Now, of course, the level of care you legally owe someone varies a lot, depending if they're invited, just permitted, or a trespasser, but that potential for a lawsuit, it's there.
Wow, okay. That difference between an invited guest and someone who shouldn't even be there, that's incredibly important. And yeah, pretty sobering. It kind of reinforces the idea that if you allow any access, even informally, risks are basically, well, inevitable, like you said. So that really makes the case for needing some way to mitigate all this, right? Just locking the gate isn't always the answer.
Exactly. And that leads us nicely into a really practical, effective solution for cutting down that risk. A hunting lease agreement. This is way more than just a handshake deal. It's a proper contract, and it usually has two key protective parts for the landowner. First, it generally provides for a liability insurance policy. Think of it like a financial safety net if something does happen and there's a claim. And second, it includes a release of liability clause. That's where the hunter agrees, in writing, that they won't sue you for certain kinds of injuries that might happen while they're using the land. So those two things working together directly help reduce the risks of having people injured or damaging your property. It's like putting up a shield beforehand.
Okay, I can definitely see the legal and financial protection there. That makes a lot of sense. But let's talk about just the hassle, the headache of managing people. You know how it goes, right? Your place gets popular, friends start bringing their friends, it gets fuzzy who's actually allowed and when and what they can do. And then you still got the issue of people who just show up uninvited, the actual trespassers. How does a lease help you limit the number of people effectively, get that control back, and maybe just reduce the stress of it all?
Right. That's a super common challenge. And a well-written hunting lease agreement tackles that directly. It acts as an ironclad statement, basically. It clearly names the specific people or the specific hunting club that is allowed on your property. No ambiguity. That makes it way easier to say no, politely but firmly, to others who ask. Plus, just having a known, regular, authorized presence on the land the leaseholders can actually be a really good deterrent. It helps ward off those uninvited guests and can cut down on that casual trespassing quite a bit. It sends a signal that the property is actively managed and monitored.
So we've got minimizing risk, getting control back. Those are huge benefits on their own. But let's talk about the bottom line. For a lot of landowners, managing property costs money. It's constant pressure. Can this leasing thing actually generate real income? Is there a financial upside here that makes the effort really pay off?
Connecting all this together, the answer we get from the sources is a big yes, yes it can, absolutely. It doesn't really matter if you're running a working farm, a cattle operation, managing timber, or even if your land just sits there most of the year. You can strategically lease out the hunting and recreational rights. And this can generate an income stream that makes your ROI, your return on investment, on a piece of property worth the investment.
Hmm.
And that's really relevant right now, isn't it? With property taxes, insurance, upkeep costs, everything seems to be climbing. This passive income from leasing hunting rights, it can be a really powerful tool. It can seriously help offset those costs and even help contribute to a profit. It's about turning something that might just be an expense into an actual asset. It's just a smart way to think about managing land long term.
Okay, that's a really strong case. Less risk, more control, actual income. Sounds pretty good. But let's get specific. What is a hunting lease really at its core? How does it actually work day to day? We've talked around it. Let's define it.
Okay, fundamentally, a hunting lease is just a simple agreement. It's a contract between the landowner and a hunter, or maybe a group of hunters like a small club. And basically, in exchange for a fee, the hunters get permission, they get access to the property for specific hunting, and sometimes other recreational rights too. But what's really key here, and super important for you as the landowner, is the control you keep. The landowner is the one who establishes the rules and sets the limits of the lease. You're in the driver's seat. So, for example, our source mentions a landowner who only wants white-tailed deer hunted and only with a bow. They can put exactly that into the written lease. It effectively not allows firearms to be used on their land. You get that fine-grained control. Now, there's a little caveat, of course. If you limit the opportunities too much, well, that may affect the value of the lease. Fewer options might mean hunters are willing to pay a bit less. It's a trade-off.
That level of specific control is really appealing. And, the source material actually gives some interesting background that helps picture this. Like down south, where you have these huge tracts of land available. There you see these really big hunt clubs. We're talking maybe 150 members leasing something massive like 15,000 acres. And these arrangements can go on for ages, passed down in families for several generations. That's kind of where commercial leasing really took off.
Long tradition there.
Yeah, exactly. But then you look at the Midwest or out east. Great hunting, obviously, but historically, formal leasing just hasn't been as big a thing, not on that scale. But that seems to be changing now. Our source says it's starting to catch on, and a big reason is worry about liability, risk, and the rising costs for land inputs. Those pressures are pushing people towards it. So up here, maybe 4 or 5 guys on a lease is what people think of as a hunt club. It's a smaller scale, more personal maybe, than those giant clubs down south with all their rules and dues. It shows the idea can adapt.
That context is really helpful. Yeah, it shows how the idea is evolving. But whether it's a huge club down south or just a few friends in the Midwest, for the arrangement to actually work well, to keep both the hunters and the landowners happy and feeling secure, our sources really stress there are 2 components that are absolute must-haves, non-negotiable really. First, you absolutely need a written lease agreement, and it must include that release of liability clause we talked about.
Yeah.
Because anything less than a written document signed by all parties leaves too much room for confusion and eventually a poor relationship. Verbal agreements just don't cut it. You need it on paper.
Clear expectations. Makes sense. What's the second must?
The second one is getting a proper hunting lease liability insurance policy. Dedicated insurance. Because without that specific liability coverage, you're honestly just risking too much. When you let hunters onto your land, paid or not, you take on some responsibility for their safety, like it or not. Think back to that example from the source. A hunter falls into an abandoned cistern well breaking a leg. It happens. If you don't have the right lease and insurance, they might argue you didn't warn them properly, and suddenly you're facing a big claim. A good hunting lease liability policy is built specifically to protect you from exactly those kinds of claims. It's that crucial safety net for the unexpected.
Okay, this is where it gets really practical for you, the listener. If you're hearing all this, the risk reduction, the control, the potential income, and you're thinking, okay, this might actually work for me. What are the actual steps? How do you get started if you're seriously considering leasing out your land?
Well, the first step, and our sources strongly recommend this, is to talk to a reputable leasing agent. These folks play a really valuable role. They can help you figure out the fair market value of your land. They'll look at things like the type of land, what wildlife is actually there, how easy it is to get to, the size of the property, all that stuff. That helps make sure your asking price is competitive in the market, so you're not leaving money on the table, but you're not asking too much either. And beyond just the price, they also help you figure out what components you'd like on your hunting lease agreement. They help tailor it to your needs before you even start looking for hunters.
So finding an agent is a good first move. What else should landowners be thinking about?
Yeah, besides the agent, you really need to take a hard look at your own property. Are there any unusual hazards? Old wells, hidden cliffs, anything like that? What animals do you actually want hunted? Are you okay with certain habitat management, like food plots, or not? You also absolutely need to check your local and state rules. Fishing and game laws, liability statutes, they can vary quite a bit. Ultimately, like the source says, you need to make sure it suits you and the needs of your property. It's got to work for you financially, sure, but also personally in terms of how you want your land managed.
So, wrapping this all up, thinking about everything we've covered in this deep dive, what's the big takeaway for you, the landowner? It really seems like doing this thoughtfully, using a hunting lease, can bring you that extra revenue, which is great, but also the peace of mind of having someone on there that will help take care of your property. It feels like a more strategic way to own land.
Absolutely. And just stepping back for one last important point, the legal side. Our sources are careful to mention that laws will vary from state to state. Liability rules, what needs to be in a lease, it's not the same everywhere. So everything we've discussed today, it's really about giving landowners a general awareness of the laws and how to best protect themselves. It's a starting point. You should always, always talk to a local lawyer to make sure your specific lease agreement is solid and follows all your state and local rules. Don't skip that step.
Definitely crucial advice. Get local legal counsel. But it leaves us with a really interesting thought, doesn't it? Considering all the ways a good lease protects you, gives you control, and even generates income. Maybe thoughtfully managing all access to your land, not just hunting, but any recreation. Maybe that's actually a more responsible way to handle it than just letting people use it for free. Something to really think about, both for your own peace of mind and maybe more importantly, for the long-term health and care of your land itself.